last 30 years. Now, we're talking about recent research which has divided the past 30 years into 5-year periods, 6 5-year periods, and the question is, which city has had the strongest 5-year growth spurt in terms of movement in house prices in that time frame? And the answer, you might think, might be Sydney, perhaps recently, or Melbourne, but it's neither of those two places. The answer is actually Perth. Between 2003 and 2007, those 5 years inclusive, Perth house prices, according to this research by PIPA, Property Investment Professionals of Australia, grew 140%. Now, to put that in context, according to this research, in the most recent 5-year period, Sydney has been number one, closely followed by Melbourne, but Sydney has grown, on average, its prices over that 5-year period, 75%. But back in that earlier period I mentioned, when Perth grew 140%, so its growth in that period from 2003 to 2007, inclusive, was almost double the percentage growth in prices that Sydney has recorded in the most recent 5-year period. Really interesting research by PIPA. What it shows, amongst many other things, is that the growth has certainly get shared around the major cities of Australia. Most of them have had their turn in the sun. We go back to the 5 years from 1988. The number one city for growth then was Brisbane. Its property value has pretty much doubled in that 5-year period from the late 80s into the early 90s. The next 5-year period, it was Darwin that was number one by quite considerable margin. It was a period in which most of the other cities didn't have much growth, but Darwin certainly had a very strong period from 1993 to 1997. Then the period from 98 to 2002, Melbourne was number one, followed closely by Sydney. Then you had that period from 2003 to 2007 in which Perth was number one, Hobart was number two, Darwin was number three. Then the period from 2008 to 2012, Darwin again led. It's interesting that Darwin has a number of times been the leader on price growth amongst the capital cities, but conversely, there's also been periods where it's been the worst, the lowest performer in other 5-year periods. So what that tells us is that Darwin is quite a volatile market, high peaks and deep troughs. And then the most recent period, we've had Sydney leading on price growth, followed closely by Melbourne, and evidence in those figures that of the recent rise of Hobart as well. So it's really, really interesting to understand that at different periods, different cities have been the market leaders. Some people hold the view that the two biggest cities, Sydney and Melbourne, are the best long term. Well, actually, it's not the case. Sydney is only, this most recent 5-year period, it's the only time that Sydney's been the market leader any time in the past 30 years. And there's been periods in which Brisbane have led, Darwin's led, Perth's led, Melbourne's led. Adelaide and Canberra have not at any stage been the market leaders in any of those 5-year periods, but they have nevertheless actually had periods when they've had pretty strong growth. So the research does show that at different times, all of the cities have had major growth. And I guess the secret for property investors is to understand that it's very rare for all the cities to be growing at the one time. We don't have one property market. We have periods when perhaps Sydney and Melbourne are rising in unison, but other cities are not. And then when those markets are actually winding down, we have other cities cranking up. That's normal in Australia. And we're actually entering another phase like that right now. The booms for Sydney and Melbourne in general terms are over. And as those markets wind down, Hobart's still very strong. Canberra's chugging along pretty nicely and showing prospects of better growth. Perth, they're entering a recovery phase. And Adelaide, I think, has shown great potential to rise as well. And we're still waiting for Brisbane to do something. So it's very, very important to be aware of these different scenarios that each of the cities is on its own cycle, driven by local economic conditions, events in the local economy, and that we do not have one market in which all cities are doing the same thing at the same time. Important to be aware of. What that means is there's always opportunities. It's not a case of, is this a good time to buy? The question is, where is it a good time to buy? Because we always have these different scenarios playing out, and at any given point in time, it's always a good time to buy somewhere somewhere where the market is on the cusp of a growth phase. Okay, so that's the research recently published by PIPA, worth considering and perhaps getting a copy and studying it, because it's very, very informative and educational. That's it for now. Terry Ryder from spotting.com.au signing off. We'll talk to you again soon.